Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Information Playground. You're listening to us in a number of ways. The Information Playground comes to you through WVLP. It's a local radio station in Valparaiso, Indiana. We're on that station on Monday mornings from 8 to 9 and Fridays from 1 to 2 in the afternoon. It's 103.1 FM if you're in Valpo. If not, you can stream us from anywhere on the planet at wvlp.org. It's a great radio station. They do a lot in the community, and I encourage you to check out the website and check us out that way. If you're not available in those times, then you can catch us on demand on any of the podcast platforms. I know we're on Spotify, Apple, and Google, but about 6 or 8 additional ones. And then we're also visible on YouTube. And the channel for all of that, or the name for all of that, is The Information Playground. I'm Ron Bush. I own Ron Bush Consulting, and we're a cybersecurity company. We consult with a number of businesses in all different industries, education and government. We do public speaking. There's a book available on Amazon called Staying Safe in a Very Dangerous World. Think before you click. That's it. That's how you catch us. We have a great guest this morning. The regular listeners may recall Dana was on the Information Playground several years back. I met her through Rotary, if I remember correctly, where she spoke at youth, oh dear, I've forgotten the name, youth something. It's something that they put on every year, Rotary does every year, and you were the speaker. After that, I asked you to be on Rotary, two different Rotary meetings, one for the main group and one for the morning group. You've been on this program before. You're just a great speaker and a wealth of knowledge. So that said, Dana Rifai, will you tell the folks a little bit about yourself and what you do and how you came to be here this morning?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Ron. I appreciate your support and I appreciate talking with you each time that we do. And a little bit about myself. I grew up in Valparaiso, Indiana. I went to Valparaiso High School and graduated from IUPUI with an English literature degree, and then went to Valparaiso Law School and completed my law degree there. And I've been practicing at Burke Costanza and Carberry ever since I received my law degree and passed the bar exam. And it's been about 13 and a half years now. So kind of flew by, but a lot of stories and meeting great people along the way.
Great. And I got news for you. That time just gets faster and faster. You get to my age, it's like watching a secondhand go around. So anyway.
I believe it.
So you have a number of different areas that you specialize in. It's kind of like being a doctor. Nobody knows everything, or in computers, nobody knows everything. Cybersecurity, they're specialists. We live in such a complex world anymore. I guess just about every industry has its areas of specialization. Law is no different. So I've written down kind of a guide to go by: estate planning, probate, guardianships, and immigration. So we're going to hit on all those, all 4 cylinders today, if you will. Let's talk about estate planning. I know that's where you plan what you're going to leave, since U-Hauls don't go to the cemeteries. You're going to leave some stuff behind. Is that estate planning? Is there more to it? What else? What goes with that?
That's a good question. That has a lot to do with estate planning. So the longer people live and the harder they work, hopefully they're accumulating a legacy for their saving up for retirement, but also hoping to leave something behind for the people that they love. And so what I do is I sit down with clients and go through their assets, what they've accumulated, how they see things being distributed after they pass. We kind of go through, well, what happens if you pass right after you execute your will or your trust? How do you want things to go? And then we kind of look down the line of hopefully living a long life and how I see my legacy going at that point. And For most people, it's about the same. For some people, it's not 100% streamlined, but they do have an idea, and they also know when to come back and see me once more time passes and they need to make a change because maybe their assets aren't what they used to be. They've used a lot of them up through retirement, or they've accumulated more assets and they have different ideas on how to give them. And really, it's not just people who have accumulated a lifetime of assets. It's also young people as well who want to come in and make sure that if something were to happen while their kids were minors, that their kids have a recommended guardian of who will care for them, and as well as an asset pool for that guardian to use to care for their minor children. So it's kind of a gambit of different tools that we use to help people plan for their morbidity. So,
well, that time's
yeah,
coming for
that's
all of us. Some of us sooner than others, but yeah, I get you. So it sounds like everybody needs to have an estate plan.
Yeah. Yes, you never know what's going to happen. And if you don't have an estate plan, then every state has its own laws of intestacy. And so the state has a way of distributing your assets if you haven't put together a will or revocable trust stating the same or performed an estate plan.
Back in the dark ages, I did financial planning as a career. Yeah. They call it wealth management now. I used to call it financial planning. And I can remember the tagline. I had a couple of guys I worked with. We did presentations, meetings, conferences, that kind of stuff. And I remember I had a CPA that worked with me, and I had an attorney specialized in estate planning. And he used to say, if you don't have a will, the state will write one for you. In fact, it's already written. It's called probate.
That's exactly.
And so that was a tagline. It was very memorable. I want to talk about probate, but before we get there, when? We talked about who. It's basically everyone needs to have some sort of an estate plan in place. It may be a will, it may be some sort of trust, and we'll get into those. But probate, what is probate?
That's a good question, and I'm glad you asked.
Thank you.
Probate is the court-administered process of distributing a person's assets. So even if a person does have a will, asset distribution upon their passing is subject to probate if those assets are held individually without rights of survivorship. So what happens is the court opens up an action and oversees the acts of either an administrator, who is the person who handles the administration of the estate, payment of final expenses, and distribution according to the intestacy laws, or the court oversees the executor, who is the named individual in a will, who will follow through with your estate plan wishes according to how the will is written. Okay, so the court makes sure everything goes where it belongs.
According to their plan. So you mentioned intestacy laws a couple of times now. When you die intestate, that means you die without a will, right?
Yes.
And so intestacy laws would be all those laws that pertain to what's in place when you do pass, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
They also determine, so the intestacy laws determine who will receive what of your estate, and whether it's your children, your spouse, your parents, your siblings. There's kind of like a roadmap. If you have a spouse and children, this is how your assets will be distributed. If you have a second marriage and children, this is how your assets will be distributed. If you don't have children and you're not married, this is how your assets will be distributed. So you really don't have any say on how your assets are distributed. And that loss of intention is probably not ideal for most people.
Mm-hmm. when you think about it, all of this stuff has changed. You know, I'm old enough that my grandmother was born in the 1800s, and which tells you I was just barely born. You know, I made the 1900s, but
no.
Anyway, she was born in the 1800s, and when her husband died, they owned a farm. They had 7 kids, and when the state came in and sold the farm, you know, this is in Oklahoma back in those days. They had the Dust Bowl days, which blew all the topsoil into Colorado and other states. And then they had followed by the Depression. So what property the banks didn't already own, they took the rest of them during the Depression. With 7 kids, the state took her property and then sold it at auction and divided it up in 8 equal parts. So here's this woman still responsible for little children at that point.
Yeah.
And she gets 1/8 of what the value of a farm is at a time where they're being sold and auctioned off right and left. I think about that and how awful and how unfair that was. And look at how things are today. I'm sure they've improved vastly since then.
Yeah.
But still giving the state the ability to determine what you've worked for all your life, as good as the state may be about it and as beneficial as that may be, it seems like there's better ways to do that. Is that where trusts come into play?
Yes. So I think people, when they come in, sometimes they have the misconception that the state is going to take away all of their assets once they pass if they don't have an estate plan. And it sounds like, unfortunately, your grandparents had some creditors, or maybe your grandfather did. And so that's why the farm was sold and maybe split the way it was.
Actually, it was for taxes. It was property taxes. It was a minimal amount of money. But you're talking about during the Depression, following the Dust Bowl days, nobody had any money. I tell you horror stories how people used to wash their plates and then they washed them into a pan and used that for soup the next night. I mean, that's how desperate things were back in those days. So that's
our blessings.
1920s, late 1920s, early 30s. And it was, if you ever see a movie called They Shoot Horses, Don't They? That gives you an idea how bad things were.
Yeah. No, I can't even imagine. So really, the state doesn't take away your property. If there's no one that comes to claim it, then it's held in unclaimed property for, I believe it's a period of 7 years. I can't remember off the top of my head. And if no one claims it from the Indiana Unclaimed Property website, then it does escheat into the state. But you mentioned a trust, Ron, and what a trust does, a revocable trust that is it protects your assets from the probate process. So it protects them in a number of ways. The court doesn't get involved if a trust is funded, meaning that your assets leave your name and go into the trust's name, and the trust would become a separate entity. And then it also protects your privacy because your estate doesn't become a matter of public record. No one is going to have any of your fingertips, either by going to the courthouse or now going online and doing a search. And then it creates ease and less cost for your beneficiaries of your estate, meaning that once you pass, the trust has all of your property in it, and your trustee can quickly jump in, show proof of your death, and then move forward with paying all of your final expenses and then distributing your assets according to your wishes as written in the trust agreement. During your lifetime, though, there is no loss of control. So when these assets are funded into the trust, you or you and your spouse have control over all those assets during your lifetime. Upon the first to pass of a husband and wife, then the surviving spouse will have full control and use and benefit of those assets to their fullest extent. And then upon your passing, that's when a successor trustee that you name in the document, someone that you trust, can take over and handle administration without the court watching over.
Excellent. I remember again from those old days that you may not know who Bing Crosby is, but he was a famous singer back in the day. Um, if you wanted to know what his family got, he died. His stuff went through probate, and I don't remember if he had a will or didn't have a will, but everything was dished out that he had upon his death as a matter of public record. Had he died with a trust, it would have avoided probate. There's two things. And you mentioned it a minute ago, a revocable will. Now you'll have to help me with pronunciation because I get corrected no matter how I say this. If I say an irrevocable will, somebody says it's irrevocable. And if I say irrevocable, they tell me, no, it's irrevocable. So I don't know. You set me straight and tell me what that is.
Tomato.
Right.
Yeah. So there's actually one kind of will, but then the trusts are either revocable or irrevocable. So revocable means that you can change your trust after it's been executed at any time. So if at some point you say, I changed my mind, I want my daughter to receive a little bit more than my son, you can go back to the drafting table with your attorney, of course, and make that change. An irrevocable trust is something where no changes can be made after execution. Only maybe very minor changes can be excusable and changed, but really the main crux of the trust has to remain the same. And people do this for different reasons. There's an ILIT, which is an irrevocable life insurance trust that's often used to pay off death taxes, estate taxes. But the current lifetime exemption is so large that most people don't really need those kinds of trusts to take care of taxes because they're not eligible to pay. Their beneficiaries are not eligible or required to pay them. And the current exemption, I haven't looked it up for 2021, but it was 11.5 and some million for an individual.
Okay. So yeah. I remember, I think from the financial planning days that trust evolved as a way to help people during certain situations. I want to say it's the Q-tip, and I don't remember what all that stands for, qualified tax investment, something maybe. Rockefeller, I think, is the one that they did. No, he had a generation skipping trust because he didn't like his son, but he liked his grandson. So he wanted to skip a generation so his son didn't get anything, but the grandson did. I think that was Rockefeller. All this stuff is, decades old, so you correct me when I'm wrong. All of it, though, with trust, if it's not in the trust, it's still going to go through probate. So just because you've written a trust, you've still got to put your checking account in that trust, which means, I believe, changing the name on it. The trust, instead of being, John Doe, it'll be for the trust of John Doe, or however the legal wording is. All of that stuff needs to be, what's the word for that when they put it in the trust?
Funding. It's called funding trust.
That's it. Funding.
Yes. So true. And I think that once you commit to a trust, you have to make sure that everything that you purchase or sell, new acquisitions, they all have to remain in the trust. Otherwise, there will be some stray asset that'll be subject to probate. And even though most of your assets will hopefully be administered by trust, your beneficiaries will still have to go through the probate process to administer the stray asset that didn't make it in.
Okay. So wills go through probate, trusts do not.
Right.
Just because you've done a trust doesn't mean it's one and done. You still have to keep up with that trust for as long as you live. Fortunately, you don't have to worry about it after you die. So that's a good thing.
That's very true.
So there's certain things involved, but a trust will help you avoid probate. So if you don't want the world to know what happened when you died, then you do a trust. There's work involved, but you can also control things. Now, you can't control everything from the grave, but you can control some things.
That's a good point. Yes. Yes. And so control could be, I want my assets to remain in trust for my one son who is a big spender and doesn't know how to take care of his money. And I want his big sister to watch over those assets, maybe even for his lifetime. So a trust can have longevity after a person passes. A trust can also give assets in installments rather than all at once. So I want to make sure that my kids are taken care of over the course of their lives. So I want them to get a little bit at 30, a little bit at 45, a little bit at 55 until they retire. And then they can figure it out for themselves. So people come in with different wishes, different kinds of families, and it's fun to get to know the clients and tailor the document to their wishes.
Great. My sister would have appreciated that illustration. The spendthrift little brother and the watchful older sister. Yeah, she would have loved that. So let's talk about guardianships.
Yeah.
What's that all about?
Yes. So guardianships have kind of exploded with the baby boomers and entering older age and questions regarding capacity. So during your lifetime, a person controls their person and their estate, meaning their assets. But when that person becomes incapacitated, then someone needs to step in and take care of the person's health, well-being, and their assets for their benefit. And so typically people will put together advanced directives, and those include a power of attorney, a healthcare power of attorney, and we also include a living will. And those help avoid a guardianship because in those documents, you name people that you trust that can handle your well-being and your assets. Mm-hmm. Now, when a person doesn't have those, then the court steps in and must appoint a guardian over a person in an estate. And that's where a guardianship comes in. When a person becomes incapacitated or may already be incapacitated with some lifelong incapacity, and a guardian needs to be appointed upon the age of majority, so the age of 18 in the state of Indiana.
Interesting. So if I want, let's say I have a brother that mm-hmm. is autistic or something like that, and I'm concerned that he may outlast me. I can appoint a guardian or do something like that. I can see all kinds of, my son may want to do that for me. I don't know. So all of this stuff, it all starts to come together. And you mentioned baby boomers. Yeah, some of us are up there pretty far. So we probably need to be concerned with that.
Yeah. So, part of our estate plan is to put together those advanced directives and give them as options to clients so that they have them to use during their lifetime. Mm-hmm. And they can be used at any time. So you may be incapacitated in the hospital for a short period of time, but you need someone to take care of your insurance matters while you're in the hospital. So that power of attorney can step in, give the document to the insurance company and say, I need to handle this on behalf of this person. Mm-hmm. But they're also there for more dire circumstances where capacity is lost altogether and is needed until the end of a person's lifetime.
So if I'm injured in an accident and I want someone to be able to advise the hospital what to do, they colloquially, that's usually termed pull the plug.
Yeah.
What's that called?
That's called a living will. And so in that document, we have 3 different options. And the first one is that I do want artificial nutrition and hydration. And these are my wishes. They're provided to the healthcare professional to carry them out. The second is that I do not. And the same thing happens, giving it to the health professional once there is really no hope for that person. And the physician has already made the determination that there really is no coming back. And then the last option is that I designate my healthcare power of attorney who I've already named in an executed healthcare power of attorney form to make that decision for me. Because under those circumstances, yes, I'm terminally ill and out of it, but I don't know what the circumstances are. So I want someone who I trust to make that decision. I don't want to make it right now.
Great.
So, yeah.
Well, we're going down a road that's disquieting. So I need to change gears here.
Oh, you know, these are hard conversations to have with people who are healthy and still vibrant. But they're necessary. During COVID, I actually updated mine as well. And it felt really good. It felt like a relief to know that my wishes that are different from 10 years ago when I first put together my estate plan are now in place and in writing and given to those I love, and in case anything happens.
What a great point. All of us change as we age. All of us think differently. I mean, the guy I am today doesn't think anything like the guy that when I was 20. I didn't think when I was 20 most of the time. But, you know, it's just everything changes. And so what a great point. Everyone should do this. Everyone should visit this, right?
Yes, I think so. I think it's put on the back burner oftentimes because we're so busy and we think, you know, we're healthy. Why should we think about it now? But life is so precious and fragile that everyone should have it. Everyone should carve out a little bit of time to go through those life administrative things and get them done.
Yeah, excellent. I want to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to carry on with anything else we need to that we haven't discussed, and then we're going to get to immigration. So we'll pause for just a moment. I'm Ron Bush. I own Ron Bush Consulting, and we're underwriting and bringing you the Information Playground. The Information Playground is designed to all aspects. We started out dealing with just cybersecurity and IT issues, and we've just expanded to all kinds of information. This is just as important and maybe more important in many respects than having your cybersecurity taken care of. This is the final stuff. So Information Playground deals with all of that. It's an educational type program. I hope that you're enjoying it. You can catch us if you're in Valparaiso, Indiana. You can catch us on 103.1 FM or stream us from anywhere in the world at wvlp.org. I hope that you check that website out because all the stuff they do in the community, and they do a lot, you can be a part of that. You can also underwrite the Information Playground or any of the programs on WVLP by going to that website. Greg Kovich is the general manager there, is a station manager, and he's a great guy. You can send him an email if you're interested, info@wvlp.org. You can check out my website, cybersecurity consulting. So it's ronbushconsulting.com. Check us out. Shoot me an email at ron@ronbushconsulting.com. Love to talk to you and handle any cybersecurity issues or questions you may have, thoughts on the program. You can also catch us on demand on any of the podcast channels that I know of under the Information Playground, or you can go to YouTube and watch us. Lovely guests like Dana Rifai. You can see her, or you can put up with me. The Information Playground on YouTube. That said, Dana, if folks have questions on this, and it wouldn't surprise me if they do, how can they get a hold of you? What's the best way?
Yeah, so they can go on to our firm website, www.bcclegal.com. And they can reach me by email. It's my last name, Rifai, R-I, F as in Frank, A-I, at B as in boy, C as in cat, C as in cat, legal.com.
Great, great. Well, that said, let's look at, so we've talked about estate planning, probate, and guardianship. Before we move to immigration, anything else we should chat about before moving on?
No, I don't think so. I think we've kind of touched on some basic estate planning just to pique, hopefully, people's interest. But there are a whole lot of other tools out there for different situations. So no situation is unique. I think there's a tool for everything.
Excellent, excellent. So let's talk about immigration. That seems I don't know, kind of a disconnect from the other three. How did you get into that? Let's get into the whys and wherefores, I guess.
Yeah. So I got into immigration during the Great Recession when I was just a very new attorney and was being trained to be estate plan probate. And also, I also practice in business law attorney and just ran out of work to do and needed a niche. And my parents are immigrants from Syria. So we had a request, a firm email came out saying we need work visas for 2 of our physical therapy firm clients and practices. And so I raised my hand and from there, here I am.
I'll do it. And now you're there all the time, huh?
Yes. But it's a very fulfilling practice. I really enjoy it. I meet a lot of immigrants that I feel like I can connect with because I have lived my parents' history as immigrants and a first generation child of immigrants. So I enjoy it a lot.
Yeah. My grandmother, my grandfather died at a young age, so I never knew him, but I knew my grandmother on my mother's side. And I never knew my grandparents on my father's side. So, but I can remember the stories, the rich stories they told. She was first generation here, and I love the stories. More of the old West. Again, I'm older and she was older. I'm the youngest of my mother, and my mother was the youngest of 7 kids, 8 actually. 1 died in childbirth. And so I can't remember. I think my grandmother was the youngest in her family. So, I mean, it seems to go back a long way. Make it sound like I'm 200 years old. I'm not. I feel it some days, but it may look it too. I'm not. But the wealth of knowledge and the joy I got just from listening to her. I mean, not everybody knows their grandparents. I'm fortunate that I knew 1 out of 4. And I loved what she told. I guess I love the help that you offer people. You know, we're a nation of immigrants.
Yeah, we are.
If you're not, Cherokee or Cheyenne or something, you came from some other country, you're an immigrant. And so most of the country's made up of us. There's just so much wealth in past history here in this country, but also what they bring from what they usually call the old country.
Yes.
Do you have any stories?
Yes. So we're steeped in culture, but yes. Lots and hard to pick from just one. But I think people start to assimilate into the American culture. And I know we're a melting pot, but there's also kind of one vein of living the American dream. But people who come from different countries just newly are still carrying with them all the culture and mindsets of the countries that they came from. And I think that's what I identify with the most, is that my parents have a way of thinking and the Arab culture. And that is always an echo in the way that I function. So I see that often, and I love to see it from different countries. I mean, there are generalizations about people from every country, and you can kind of see little hints and nuances of it. The Japanese are so polite and kind and respectful. And then you meet with the Italians, who are loud and expressive, and not all of them, but just they have this like deep warmth to them, the way they communicate. So it's very nice, but everyone comes anxious about the immigration process and how they can remain here to move forward with whatever the opportunity they seek here. And I think that is like a common thread with all of my immigration clients. So something to just be mindful of, because they're all going through a lot of stress through the process.
Oh, I can't imagine going through it with all the rules and all the rhetoric that's spilled out today and all the stuff going on. at any time when you're leaving your home, all the stuff you know, all your life, your history, your family, and you're pulling up your roots and moving somewhere else. There's very few things in life I can think of more traumatic than that.
I can't even imagine.
Yeah, I can't.
I know. I make one small difference in my life and I get all anxious about it. I don't know how they do it.
Obviously, the desire to come to America. And you mentioned the American dream. Everybody has, it seems like today, their own definition of the American dream. I'll tell you what it is to me. It's the freedom to do in life what you want. I mean, it's got to be legal. Let's put that out there. I can't decide that, I want to be a bank robber and that'll be my chosen profession. No, it's got to be legal. But it's the idea that if I want to work for a company, I can do that. If I want to own my own company, I can do that. If I want to rent an apartment, I can do that. If I want to own a house, I can do that. It doesn't mean that I have to do any of that. It means that I have the choice to pursue that. I can't own a house unless I save up money for a down payment and I make the payments on it. Otherwise, they take it away from me. But I can own it if I do the rules, if I play by the rules and do the things the law requires of me. And the same is true with owning a business. If I'm going to hire employees, man, I better pay taxes or the government will decide whether I own that business or not real fast. But I've got to do all the right things, all the laws and regulations that go with that. But I can choose that. I don't have to own a business. Nobody's going to make me do that. And nobody's going to make me own a house or rent an apartment. I can live where I want. I can do what I want within boundaries and reasons. I mean, you always got to put that in. I find people, that decide they can't do something. Well, you didn't take everything into account. There's a cost to everything, and there's rules to everything. You have to live within those. But the American dream, I think, is just the freedom to choose what it is you want to do. I can say I want to be a philanthropist, but without the money, to throw it at different causes, I can't be one. So it's that freedom to choose that. I think when I look at other countries, I'm not a world traveler, but I've been to a few other countries. I don't see that. I don't see the ability to choose that. Do you think that's what the folks you help? Am I right in that? That's what they're looking here. It's that freedom to choose, the freedom to succeed. If they were in Russia, they couldn't do certain things, and everything they do has to pass a certain test. Same with China and other parts of the country or other parts of the world. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree, Ron. I mean, I think that's probably a big part of why a lot of immigrants come to the U.S. There are rules that verge on unfairness or corruption, and so they aren't able to excel at what they do. They may be held back in different ways that we don't understand. And so the ability to come to the U.S. allows them to flourish, gives them the opportunity.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So how do you get your clients? They don't know Dana Rifai if they're coming from, I don't know, Dublin, Ireland. How do they, and I just pulled that was the first place came to mind. How do they know to contact you? What is it that you do with or for them that helps them gain entry? And how do the immigration laws work? I've read stuff about how people have to wait years to get into this country.
Right.
I'm doing question bombardment here. Please forgive me. Take whatever question you want. There's just a lot of stuff to know.
Yes. So the first thing is, how do they get to know about me? A lot of them come through word of mouth, but there's a fair amount of marketing that I do. I speak at a lot of different venues. I think I spoke at Rotary about immigration once. So that helps spread the word. We also do some website, online, social media marketing, but I think the best kind of marketing is word of mouth, and then also hearing a little bit about the process and connecting the person in need with myself and our office. But the second question, which was what are the waiting times and what's the process of getting to the US? And that really is very circumstance specific to the individual. So if they're coming through family sponsorship, then there are different tiers of waiting to come into the US. The quickest path is through a spouse, so marrying a US citizen, having a US citizen child who is 21 years or older to sponsor you. That is a direct and immediate path. And then the third one is having a minor child of a US citizen, 21 years or younger. So those are the quickest ways to get into the US through family sponsorship. Then the tiers kind of go down.
What's the timeline on
based on how far away the relief on coming into the US? So it just depends on the processing time of the application, which is different. So during COVID, all government processing times are much slower and it's very hard. Embassies have been closed due to health restrictions or presidential proclamations, which have halted issuing of visas to keep the US's health safety standards or protect jobs during the downturn in the economy. So there are those things to consider right now. But the timing is different for those family members.
So if I'm in, I'll keep Dublin, Ireland, rather than spend time trying to think of somewhere else. And I want to get here. If I've got a family member, and that can be a spouse, it can be a blood relative like an uncle or a grandparent, a parent, a son, a daughter, they can sponsor me, and that's the quickest way. And it could be 6 months or a year or longer.
Probably longer right now. So under normal times, it takes about a year and a half from nuts to bolts, or like from start to finish. But right now it's taking an unknown amount of time. But we'll see. We'll see what President Biden has to say about the rules that have been set in place to handle the pandemic. So we'll see. I must say immigration law right now is dizzying because the rules are changing on a daily, almost hourly basis. Things are changing fast. Wow. Yeah.
Well, I just so many questions. I don't know which one to ask first. I was using the example of Dublin, Ireland, and it makes it different if it's not Dublin. If instead it's Somalia, or it's Iran, or it's some other place. Maybe there's troubles going on there. That's going to lengthen it or exclude me altogether. What's the truth there?
Certainly. So the Department of State governs the U.S. embassies and consulates all over the world. So for the most part, every country has a U.S. embassy in it, unless the Department of State has said that we do not want a U.S. embassy in this country for whatever reason. Right. And usually it's due to just the harm that could be caused to the people in that embassy. Or political reasons. So those embassies have a lot of discretion on how they operate. And we go into their websites to see what their standards of procedure are that the embassies have room to create that's different than the immigration regulations and laws. So that may influence waiting times as well.
Okay. So I suppose it helps if you know someone maybe at the embassy. I know if I wanted my son to go to West Point, it would help if I could go to the state senator or the representative and have them write a letter of recommendation. I assume it would also help if you're in Istanbul, Turkey, and you want to come to America, you have whoever's at the embassy there write a letter of recommendation. Does that make sense? Or?
That may be true, but the people at the embassy are less known than your senator or congressman. So it's harder to nail down that individual. And a lot of times we use our congressmen and senators here in the US to be a liaison to the embassies for us.
Okay, excellent. I've also read that many of the employees at the embassies are CIA or CIA related. Just as, I mean, all the embassies that I read about, they don't put, John Doe in an embassy in America. They put, whether it's GRU, which used to be the KGB, or they put, someone in that capacity, spy, basically. They put them in the embassies here. So I think I read somewhere that we have 100,000 spies basically around the planet. China has 100,000 of them here. And that's true. At least that's true. That's what I've read.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the way that stuff works. That makes sense why your embassy people wouldn't be well known. They're not there to be well known. So things get harder if you don't have family endorsement or sponsorship, and depending on where you're coming from. And under current rules and regulations, we all have, even if we don't watch the news faithfully, you'd have to be under a rock not to know all the stuff that's happened with immigration the last 4 years.
Right, yeah.
So,
well, there's another way too, Ron, that someone can come to the US, and that's through employment. So if they have a sponsor that will employ them here in the US, then there's an avenue that way. If a person has extraordinary abilities, who is able to offer services, research, cultural talents, any kind of extraordinary ability, that is a very quick way to come into the US. And then there are just kind of miscellaneous ways to come into the US. And it all depends on a person's intent. So whether they would like to come into the US as an immigrant to stay here permanently and gain a permanent resident card, or whether they have non-immigrant intent, meaning that they want to come here temporarily for a specific purpose and then return to their home country to reside.
If I recall the argument correctly, it was that many students and many employees had, is that 12B1 for the employees? Is that what it is? Or am I confusing that with something else? It's
H-1B.
H-1B, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I had some of the numbers and letters, give me a break. So
I know, they're confusing.
So some of them came over, and when their visa expired, they decided not to leave. So they're staying here. Unfortunately, we don't necessarily keep up with them. Same with students. They came over on student visas. And so for whatever reason, they've kind of dropped off. And I think that's part of the argument. That's also part of the argument on the illegal immigration issue. And I hear all kinds of numbers, everything from 11 million up to 40 million at one time. Illegal immigrants. I have no idea what the right number is or accurate number is. But I think that's part of the argument for better, stronger regulations, maybe. I say all of that. And I've also read that Congress has had it on their plate to deal with this for the last 50 years, and they never have. Reagan did, I can't think of what it's called, where he just, everybody that was here illegally. Amnesty, thank you. Reagan did that must have been the 80s. And that was 11 or 12 million that were given resident status, apparently. I didn't pay any attention to it back in the 80s, but apparently that's what I've read. And yet here we are again. The rules aren't fixed. Nobody seems to know what they're doing, and they change almost hourly. What do we do? We're starting to run out of time, and I always like to have a solution when I finish. What can we do about this stuff?
Well, I think right now, instantaneously, it's going back and taking a look at all of the restrictions that have been put forth in haste, because there are President Trump's agenda, and it's his cause, which I respect, but it was to eliminate and tighten the reins on immigration as much as possible. And so there have been a lot of restrictions that have been put in place, but without a lot of looking into the mechanics of how the immigration process works. And so I think a revisiting of that would be really helpful, particularly to the practitioners and myself selfishly, because there has been a common way of doing things for so long that have been changed in drastic ways that need to be reviewed. So I think that is in the immediate, and then in the future, it's looking at a lot of data to see, which visas do we need more of, which do we need less of, how can we make sure that we're screening properly and people that shouldn't be here aren't let in. How do those measures look like? Because you want to create family unity, and you want to allow people to be with their loved ones, and you want to allow talent to be in the US to keep the economy strong and encourage a global market, but not at the risk of American jobs, of course, and not at the risk of homeland security. So I think it's a tall order and just my wish list for now.
Yeah, I share your guarded optimism there. I think the frustrating, and I don't know if others would agree with this, but the thing that always frustrates me here is everybody has a way of saying, not my job, it's theirs. President says it's Congress' job. Representatives say Senate, and Senate says representatives. And then some of them go back to the president. I mean, everybody wants somebody else to take care of it, but nobody wants to take responsibility and do it. And it isn't just immigration. That's an even longer and deeper subject, but it just, 50 years is long enough. When will they get around to this stuff? I suppose we could all write our Congress people and ask them to do something. What, in a perfect world, we would have a system that worked. I think about you and me. We're basically, data on us compiles by the second basis. There's more known about you and me. I taught a class before we got on to record this, and I said, if you were to look at the record of data that's on you, able to have it all in one place, from advertising and marketing, Amazon, Axiom, all to the government, the NSA and the FBI, everybody. If you took all that stuff and put it together, you would learn things about yourself that you never had any idea, because your entire picture is there.
Right.
With that as a preface, why in the world, we can do that? Why can't we get our act together and do this? It's just frustrating. It's just absolutely frustrating. Final thoughts. We've got a few minutes. Final thoughts on the subject?
Yeah, I think that it's too big a problem to tackle. And that's why sometimes when something is so complicated, it's hard to approach. And that's why it's kind of left on the back burner for another day when there's less pressing issues to attend to. But from my perspective as a practitioner practicing in immigration law, I would like to see officers make more exceptions, because really it is a human business, and sometimes the law doesn't work perfectly for every single situation. So having the law and the processes as they are is great. But when there is a specific circumstance that the law doesn't cover, especially in immigration law, it would be nice to have discretion. Mm-hmm. And that's what I'd like to see.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think a lot of the trouble that we have with human trafficking, a lot of it falls at the feet of immigration rules. Honest people that want to come to this country and don't have the time to wait in Guatemala or, some other such country. Yeah. They try to get here any way they can, and they give up everything they have. They pay some guy that's, let's say, less than honorable, and they wind up in a semi-truck stuck in the desert somewhere, and they die as a result of that, or they make it, and they're at the mercy of other human traffickers. I mean, it's just an awful, sordid affair that if we had better, clearer, stronger, and fairer regulation, wouldn't avoid all of it. You're not going to get rid of that, I don't think. But we could certainly get rid of a lot of it. And I think that's one thing that gets lost. It isn't just a a financial consideration in all the arguments that you hear on the news. It's a human situation. There are good, innocent people that die or live a life that, you know, some of the stuff I've read might be worse than death because they're at the mercy of somebody that has no qualms about enslaving them. And it's just awful what can happen to some folks.
It's gut-wrenching. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I want to tell you, I really appreciate you being on the program. We've covered a lot of ground today.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some of it depresses me.
No, we talked about issues. We talked about immigration and difficulty in figuring out. Yes.
Yeah.
But it's a pleasure. I really enjoy talking to you, Ron, and kind of back and forthing these different practice areas of mine. So thank you.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you. So I want to remind people you're listening to the Information Playground. You can catch us on WVLP. I've said that to you twice, but I hope you go there, wvlp.org. Check us out. If you want to catch us, not live because we record these, pre-record them, but we are broadcast on WVLP Monday mornings at 8 a.m. and that's Central Time. If you're not in Valparaiso, if you're not in that area of Indiana. Indiana is one of those states that couldn't make up its mind, so it's both East and Central Time. But I'm not a native Hoosier, but those of you that are, please don't throw stuff at the screen if you're watching me on YouTube. So you can catch us at 8 a.m. on Monday mornings. You can catch us at 1 p.m. on Friday afternoons. If you want to catch us on demand, go to any of the podcast stations or platforms, I think of Spotify and Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts, all those things. Catch us there or watch us on YouTube. All under the Information Playground. And all three words are important because apparently it's a pretty popular name. It's the Information Playground. And you'll look for Ron Bush. I own Ron Bush Consulting. You can check out my website, check out my book on Amazon. And you can reach me, ron@ronbushconsulting.com. Dana, tell folks again how they can reach you, and I'll let you take the floor for a moment.
Thank you. Folks can reach me at my email at Rifai, R-I-F as in Frank, A-I, at B as in boy, C as in cat, C as in cat, legal.com, or on our website, which is www.bcclegal.com. Excellent.
Excellent. Well, I hope you've enjoyed the program today and found it educational and maybe even edifying. If you have, drop an email, ron@ronbush consulting. Let me know. If you want to underwrite this program or any others on WVLP, send Greg Kovich an email, greg@wvlp.org. And his Greg has 3 G's in it. I don't know if that's important. I mean, he would tell me that's the right way to spell it. I have another friend that spells it with a G in the front and a G at the end. He says it's the right way. So I'm no authority on Greg. So his has GREGG at it's info@wvlp.org. Got off on a tangent there. So let him know, and let him know if you're interested in underwriting something on the station. Thank you for being with us. Have a great day. Bye.